How much of a filmmaker's identity can you see in their very first film? This is Dave's Movie Diary, where I revisit films that I've watched throughout my life and look at them through the perspective of who I am now. Not just whether they still work, but what they reveal about the characters, the stories, and the person watching them years later. Today I'm revisiting Following, Christopher Nolan's 1998 debut feature. It was a low-budget, black and white psychological thriller about a young writer who becomes fascinated by watching strangers and then finds himself pulled into a world of deception, crime, and shifting realities. Why did I revisit this film? Well, to be honest, I don't think any of us can go a day at the moment without hearing something about Christopher Nolan, chiefly because of the release of The Odyssey and the fanfare around the making of the film, the casting of the film, finally the release of the film, and then the reaction to the film. But I feel even before the release of Odyssey and the lead up to it, he's such an esteemed filmmaker for this generation now, that his films are always being talked about. Probably ever since The Dark Knight came out in 2008, to be honest. And each new film has garnered more followers and more commentary and more admirers and occasionally some criticism too. So he is really an event filmmaker, and I thought it was a good time to go back right to the start and re-examine Following. I've seen Following. I saw it a long time ago. I'm not exactly sure when. But I couldn't recall too much about it. I do remember it being good. I don't have a negative memory of the film. But apart from that, don't really remember anything about it. And I thought it would be interesting to look back at the beginning of his career. And of course, after this, he went on to bigger and better things. I also wanted to see if it was evident about if there was evidence there about the filmmaker that he would become. So what's it about? Well, the film begins with Bill, a young writer who's living in London, and he just leads off with explaining his fascination with following strangers. There's no lead up to it. He just starts talking about it, and he's doing it, and we're following him. We're following him. And he explains that when he's walking through a crowd, he sometimes notices a person and starts imagining their life, where they live, what they do, what their story might be. But rather than just imagining about their lives, like we all do when we're people watching, Bill decides to take it further. He's following them, not because he wants to hurt them or steal from them or do anything. He's just curious. But don't worry, because he's got rules. He chooses them randomly. He doesn't follow the same person repeatedly. He keeps his distance. Doesn't get creepy about it, allegedly, and doesn't interfere with their lives. Just an observer. And as a writer, he's probably, I guess, looking for inspiration by watching real people. Eventually, though, Bill breaks his own rules and becomes fascinated by a man named Cobb. And things get interesting when Cobb notices Bill following him and confronts him. But rather than being angry, Cobb is almost amused. And he lets it slip that he's a professional burglar. But he's also got his own philosophy. We find this out later when Bill goes along with some of these break-ins. Cobb believes that people have become too attached to their possessions, and that breaking into their homes and making it obvious forces them to reconsider what actually matters in their lives. And to Cobb, burglary is almost a form of social experiment. Bill becomes fascinated by Cobb and embraces this new lifestyle wholeheartedly. And the deeper Bill gets, though, the more his own identity starts changing in his attitudes. And a major turning point comes when Bill transforms himself. He gets a haircut, starts wearing a suit, just like Cobb. And he does become more confident and more aggressive. to the point where he approaches a woman at a bar and presents himself as someone completely different from the person that we knew from the beginning of the film. And this is an early example to me of one of Nolan's biggest interests, and that is identity and the roles that people create for themselves. The film then unfolds in a deliberately fragmented way because Nolan shifts the timeline, starts revealing events out of order, and we notice that Bill has some injuries. He's been beaten up. He's got this relationship now with a mysterious woman who also seems to know Cobb. And early in the film, Nolan had introduced the bruises on Bill's face, and it left me constantly wondering, how did they get there? What happened to him? And as the story goes on, it's obvious that Bill's been involved in a much bigger deception than he realizes. No one is who they appear to be. Everything's carefully constructed. Nothing is actually random. And what appeared chaotic was actually controlled. And to me, I think it becomes one of Nolan's earliest examples of taking the audience through confusion before revealing the bigger picture. So there's a lot going on. When the film got going, or not too far into it, I immediately started thinking that it was reminiscent of novels I've read by Paul Auster, he's passed away now. He was a brilliant writer, and he wrote about ordinary people doing strange things that are just treated as normal. And his novels have a lot of coincidence and chance and uncertainty, and they often depict worlds or experiences where reality slowly starts to blur. And I thought that the opening idea in this film was really relatable. Seeing someone in a crowd and wondering, who are they? What are they like? What's their life like? I've often thought that myself, but I haven't done anything like Bill does. But Nolan really takes that simple human curiosity and pushes it into something much darker in this film and in other films. And I think the fascinating thing about Following is that Nolan's interests are already set out in this film. Even with almost no budget, he's exploring ideas that would appear throughout his career. One of them is time. This story isn't told in a straightforward way at all. And we, as the audience, have to reconstruct the events, and we're forced to question what we know. And that's something that he's done quite a few times, memorably, in my opinion, in Memento. Not so memorably in Tenet. And maybe somewhere in between with Inception. Interstellar is also about time in a different way again. But yeah, time and the sequence of events are something that Nolan's very interested in. Identity as well. Bill definitely changes not just his appearance, but his attitudes throughout the film. Characters often perform versions of themselves, and you're never quite sure about who's who. Memento again does that quite well. Perception. Can we ever trust what we're seeing? That's a loaded question. That's a very philosophical question. There's probably no real answer to that, but can we at least trust the people telling us a story? When it comes to Nolan and other similar filmmakers, it's dubious probably. And I think, in my own experience, talking about Christopher Nolan films with other people, there's often different takes on what's actually happened. And I don't know if that's Christopher Nolan's intention, but it probably is. So after this, of course, he follows it up with Memento in 2000, which I remember as a brilliant movie. Insomnia in 2002, which is more a traditional telling of a story based on a Danish film from 1997 maybe with Stellan Skarsgård. And then he gets into the Batman universe. And of course, The Dark Knight, which is the middle film of the three, takes off for good reason and pushes Nolan into new territory. Inception only cements that reputation. Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet was released during COVID, and that on its own was a big deal. But it also really played with people's minds. And then he returned with Oppenheimer in 2023, which is, again, a more traditional telling of a story, but he did it with such pizzazz and such flair and brilliant performances. That movie was incredible. And, of course, now The Odyssey, which I haven't seen yet. So the scale of his films became huge. The Odyssey, by all accounts, is, if you're taking on Homer's sacred story, then you are fully at the height of your game. But lots of those other films, making Batman films, but Inception, Interstellar, even Dunkirk, the scale of that film, they're all massive films, but enormous budgets. But I think he's interested in similar things. Not so much in films like Dunkirk and Insomnia, but with Inception and Interstellar, Tenet definitely, Memento as well. Similar themes about what's really going on. Can we trust what we're seeing? Now, I really admire Christopher Nolan's ability to construct these worlds. They're incredibly clever and complex, but I do have to say that now in my 50s, my relationship with time-shifting films has definitely changed. When I was younger, like everyone else, I really enjoyed trying to solve, well, what happened first? How does this scene connect with the others? What's the twist? Pulp Fiction, The Usual Suspects, films like that, which are really clever puzzle films. But now I find myself being much more interested in why do characters behave this way or that? What motivates them? And what does the film reveal about people? And how do I feel about all this? So you can see how I've changed over time, and my relationship with films that are really shifting back and forth has changed as well. So the way that Nolan uses time is different too. Like with Memento, the structure to that film is essential because Guy Pearce's character, his memory condition means that the audience experiences the world as he does, and that's crucial. So the storytelling has a purpose, and the timing dynamics of that film are working towards a purpose. Following as well, I guess the fractured story or structure creates mystery and helps reveal the deception, and it's not too difficult to follow. I did have to think about it a fair bit, but I think I got it, and it's sort of laid out for you at the end. Tenet, however, I feel like the concept of time is the entire foundation of that film, and it's fascinating, but I found it hard to connect with that film emotionally, and I'll admit it, I got lost. I've seen it about 3 times. I still couldn't tell you what actually happens. Inception as well falls within that same area for me. I recall struggling with it as well. So I think he uses time in different ways, and for me personally, with varying success. The characters in this film are interesting. I thought Bill's character was it was fun going on the ride with Bill because he starts out as someone who's fascinated by other people's lives. He's a writer, so he's always wanting to understand people and strangers. But he ends up becoming part of a world he doesn't understand, and that's always fun to watch. It reminds me of what happens with Bill Pullman in Malice, or Tom Cruise's character in Eyes Wide Shut, or the main character in Body Double. I always find it interesting to watch people thrown off balance and getting in deeper. 8mm, the Nick Cage film, another example, and getting way in above their head, and then trying to get out of it. I'm always captivated by that, especially in this one where it's a quiet, not a confident guy, who then has to do some pretty unimaginable things. Cobb, on the other hand, who's like, I'm going to call him the criminal philosopher. He's also an interesting guy, but diametrically opposed to Bill. Someone without a conscience. He almost sells burglary as a service that he's doing to humanity, and really enjoys manipulating and controlling people for his own malicious purposes. And the actor portraying Cobb does a fantastic job, because he is really malevolent and, for me anyway, totally unlikable, but I couldn't keep my eyes off him. The woman in this film too is brilliant. She's mysterious from beginning to end, very noirish. A key piece of the larger puzzle to this film, a seductress, seemingly to both male characters, definitely her own person though, and again, really well acted. They're very convincing, all three leads. They all bring something different. Bill with his curiosity and vulnerability, Cobb with that intelligence and confidence, and an evil SOB, and the woman brings a lot of ambiguity, which I'm a big fan of. And I feel like the performances suit the really strange, unpredictable nature of the film. Lots of things worked for me with this one. The screenplay, I thought it was really clever, but not too clever. Doesn't get too far ahead of itself. Doesn't tie itself in too many knots. The final sequence and the twist, the final reveal was well done. The black and white photography, I mean, I've said this on so many pods now, but does it ever fail? I don't think so. Especially for a first up film. There's a lot of atmosphere created here as well, in these offbeat locations in London, these small flats, the rooftops. It's a very small film, and the 70-minute running time, I'm a big fan of that. It's perfect. It's compact. I often say there's no fat in a certain film. Well, there's less than. It's anemic, but it's great for this type of film. Every scene matters. Every scene has a purpose, and he doesn't go too over the top. Sometimes the puzzle does become more important than the people, but I feel like he gets the balance pretty much right. In 70 minutes, he doesn't go. There's no diversions in this. For people who don't like timeline shifts, you will struggle, or you won't appreciate this film as much as others. So I really enjoyed this film more than I expected. I think the first viewing would be about trying to understand what's happening. The second viewing really allows you to appreciate the construction, and the ending changes the entire film for me. So I think it could be a date film. It's short. It's really clever. There's male and female characters in there. There's some sauciness. It's really different. There's heaps to talk about afterwards, and there's different types of characters and personality types. Just don't expect a warm or romantic film. Don't think it's a hangover film. It requires a lot of concentration, and attention. It's in black and white. It's not nostalgic. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a good watch alone. You can focus on trying to piece together what Nolan's doing here and enjoy the mystery. So I think it is a remarkable first up effort. when I think about it in those terms, because it doesn't feel like a filmmaker who's searching for his voice. It feels like a filmmaker um, who knows the questions that he's going to spend his career asking, just in different ways, about time and about identity and reality, but above all, perception. I think that's what Nolan is chiefly interested in, amongst other things. But I think it's always there in his idiosyncratic films where there isn't strong source material to rely on, like Insomnia or Oppenheimer or Dunkirk. So I think I've said this before, that some filmmakers do announce themselves immediately. David Lynch with Eraserhead, I mean, that still pops up on weirdest films of all time lists, and felt like a totally original artistic voice arriving on the scene. Whereas Ridley Scott's film, The Duelists, was incredibly well made and crafted, I think, for a first up effort in particular. But it doesn't necessarily reveal what would follow. It wasn't, and I mean, Ridley Scott doesn't necessarily make very personal films. It showed touches of what he would do, but I just didn't feel like it arrived like this film possibly does. And maybe this film didn't arrive like that in 1998. It was probably largely ignored. But when you go back and look at it now, I can see lots of indications about what Nolan became. Tiny little film made with probably limited resources. Very well done. So, how much of a filmmaker's identity can you see in their very first film? For Christopher Nolan, I think the answer is quite a lot. The budgets got a lot bigger and the concepts became more complicated, but the fascination with time and identity and perception was there from the get-go. So it makes following a really fascinating first step in the career of one of the most important filmmakers working today. I am surprised that I don't remember more about it from that first watch. All I can say is that if I saw it around that time, I maybe was trying to watch it being hungover, because that was a pretty common theme for me in the late 90s. Or I just wasn't tuned in enough and appreciative of what this man ultimately became. Who knows? Anyway, glad I circled back to it. So that's Following from 1998. Thanks as always for tuning in, and see you next time.